wanted to just take a moment to reiterate why it's difficult to deal with a book like this. So I made a few notes I just want to kind of go over. First of all, this is Hebrew wisdom literature. And that is a different genre than most of us are used to. And it's got a lot of Hebrew sound plays between words that we don't pick up in English at all. And there are a lot of idioms from the ancient Near East, particularly in the wisdom literature genre that is cross-cultural. I mean, there's Egyptian wisdom, there's Babylonian wisdom, Sumerian earlier than that, and then Israel. And these concepts and idioms move between these countries. Now, Israel's is unique because of her deity in the content, but the form is the same and the idioms are the same. And so that's difficult. The other thing is the repetitiveness. And I'm sure that's what you're sensing. When he's going to look at life from different angles, different experiences, but he's going to come to the same conclusion over and over and over again. Now, wisdom teachers believed that repetition was a form of good education. And now for us, it becomes monotonous and we get tension-filled about it. But this is not our literature. This is ancient literature. But these are some reasons why most people don't try to go verse by verse through Ecclesiastes. But I think that we need to honor the inspired author. This is an inspired author. This author has a message. He wants to give it his way, and I need to allow him to do that, even though it's not the way I would present it. It's not the vocabulary. It's not the structure. It's his structure, and he's inspired, and I'm not. So we've got to be patient with him and let him do it his way. Now, when I say structured, I use that term very loosely. I'm not sure this book is structured. It looks to me like if you ever looked at my notes, particularly when I compare those English translations, those little parentheses mean that those particular translation committees see certain literary units in here. But you would be very hard pressed to say this literary unit is here and it's based on the use of a certain word or based on the use of contrast. But that's what they have to do. That's why I think it's fair for me to say this is more like a very thoughtful sage trying to analyze life through observational experiences. And every time he would look at a certain area, he would come to the same conclusion. And so it looks like he's repeating the same truths, but what he's doing is taking different areas of life in that day, looking at them, trying to find wisdom, trying to find advantage or profit, and then in the end saying, humans can't know. It's in the hand of God. There are some simple things that God gives you. Take them and enjoy them. Now, this is a repetitive thing, but it's used in different experiences. Now, one of the things that this little book, I hope you're familiar with this, called Cracking the Old Testament Codes. This is a book by D. Brent Sandy and Geis, and it's on Old Testament genres. Now, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth is on Old Testament and New Testament genres. So this is exclusively Old Testament. And in the section of Ecclesiastes, it's about page 271, he's going to make a statement that he believes there is a pattern that comes in the way this man presents truth. And he says that the book is characterized by its polarities. Now, we would probably call that opposites, but he's going to take things that are obviously different, obviously the extremes on a continuum, and he's going to apply his observational skills. Now, I wanted to read a paragraph or two out of this book, and you should let me for a minute. Good. Go ahead, Bob. Thank you. Polarity constitutes the unifying structure of the book. Though polarity, parenthesis, or tension created by the juxtaposition of two basic ideals or element to one another, the life and death, or wisdom and foolishness, two examples, is the most important characteristic of this book. Isn't that shocking to you? The use of tension is the genius of the speculation and discussion wisdom. Now, he's going to call this type of literature anti-wisdom wisdom. We would call it against traditional wisdom. It's someone thinking outside the box, drawing outside the lines, and that's kind of what this literature is known by. And there are examples of this both in Babylon and in Egypt. So it's not unique to Israel. Let me get back to where I was. Let's see. The polarization that characterizes Coley's treatise prevents biblical wisdom tradition from fossilizing. Now, think what I'm saying. I'm talking to you. From the degeneration into a smug and self-sufficient system of canned theology for life's problems. All of us do that. Real quick, the worst thing we can do is walk into a crisis and quote Romans 8:28. Romans 8:28 is true, but it is a sledgehammer when people are in crisis. For this, For this reason, the book of Ecclesiastes is one of the most important possessions of the Christian church, since it compels us to continually evaluate and correct our understanding of God and our teaching about God in light of the whole biblical revelation. That's a word we need to hear. The purpose of counter wisdom, like that found in Ecclesiastes, is to force the reader or listener to be brutally honest with both self and God by making us look straight at the darkness of our ignorance and the unknown beyond. Coley compels us to take a stand to say what we believe and why. Perhaps the most important reflections of this sage in Ecclesiastes unmask the myth of human autonomy and self-sufficiency and drives us all to our frailty and inability to find meaning in a crooked world, in the Creator's creation relationship to ultimate polarity. Now, I think it was G. Campbell Morgan that I have in my introduction. I didn't quote, I don't think, but he says this book drove him as a young atheist to think about the hopelessness, helplessness, and meaninglessness of life on this planet if there is no God. Now, we have been playing on that with this little phrase, vanity of vanities, chapter 1, verse 2, and under the sun, chapter 1, verse 3. And I've said to you, my understanding of this book is he's going to do sarcasm or tongue-in-cheek related to traditional Jewish wisdom, or really ancient Near Eastern wisdom. And it's going to say, look, this doesn't always fit life. This is a nice, clear theological statement, and many times it's true, but it doesn't answer all of the difficulties of life. So he is forcing us to look at really I don't want to be too crude, but if there is no God, you and I are just waiting for a place to die. There's no memory of us. There's no purpose in our life. There's no lasting benefit in what we do or who we are. Everybody we know is gone and will never come back. Can you think of the darkness and hopelessness of modern secular man? Oh, how they need a word from us about the hope of faith and belief. Not naive, but there is evidence around us and in Revelation that there is something more than just this. And then again, the question that I think most atheists ask, and I think maybe catches most atheists, why all the evil and suffering? Why all this misery? Well, this is not the world that God intended it to be, but he has chosen to still be active in this world, even though we cannot fully understand why or how, but we believe it, like the book of Esther, he is the unseen hand active in our world. But it still doesn't mean that individuals don't suffer both disease and pain and unfairness and injustice. We do. And so this book, I think, has a real philosophical place, particularly in a modern secularist, atheistic, humanistic setting, naturalist setting, materialist setting. This book is sharp as a two-edged sword. And that's why I wanted to cover it. Okay, let's see. Okay, would you look at Charlie, put that Ecclesiastes chapter 9, the comparison of the translations up for a minute. You will notice there under today's English version, the little parenthesis under the wicked and the righteous. You see where it says chapter 8, verse 9 through chapter 9, verse 12. And several of these different, if you look down that same page on the New King James, it's going to say 9:13 to 10:20. None of these characterizations are inspired. It's a later author's attempt to find some kind of unifying theme, unifying topic, unifying word, to try to find some literary units in here. I'm not sure there really were ever intended to be literary units. There are recurring words. There are recurring themes, but it doesn't seem it's a logical progression. It just seems like we're going to talk about this area, we're going to talk about this area, we're going to talk about this area, and the conclusion for each one is the same. And I think that's where we are in this book. So you can think about that and see what you think. Let's go to chapter 1, verse 1. There are several words that I have circled in my notes that I want to deal with in verse 1. Now, there is a manuscript problem here in verse 1. It's either the word taken or the word set. This is one of those manuscript problems that just makes no difference whether it's a question of which verb is used, but they both have the same meaning. For I have taken all this to heart, or I have set my heart. Well, they're both the same thing. This is much like chapters 1 and 2. I'm not sure we're using Solomon as literary foil again, but here's a human being saying, I'm gonna understand what this is all about. I'm going to study and pray and read and look around. I'm going to figure this out. Okay, that's what this is talking about. And then notice it says the word explain. That's a tough word. If you look down in the notes there, I've done two things right below that. For I have taken all this to heart. It sounds very much like chapters 1 and 2 and what the author is saying. The author's mind and experience led him to affirm that life is shocking, unknowable, and unfair. Oh, but don't you feel that? Don't you feel that? Then notice the parallelism here. The word righteous men and wise men are obviously meant to be put together. Righteous men are wise men. Wise men are righteous men. I mean, this is a way of characterizing that group. Then notice in the notes it says wise persons are righteous person. The righteous and the wicked are contrasted in verse 2. Notice how they're contrasted. Righteous versus wicked, good versus bad, clean versus unclean, the man who offers a sacrifice versus the man who does not sacrifice, and the man who takes an oath against the man who does not take an oath. Now, remember, these are covenant people. This is Mosaic covenant people we're talking about. So this is in the context of the requirements of the Torah, Genesis, particularly Leviticus and Exodus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. So that's what he's talking about here. Now, the word explain is one of those interesting words. I've given you all the English translations there in the notes to try to show you how wide the semantic field is. It seems like most Hebrew lexicons say it means to make clear or to explain. The same trilateral consonantal Hebrew root in Arabic means to examine, and that's how many translations have done that. Now, notice, if you will, I'm go back. Let's see, Charlie, you're down way too far. Go back to chapter 1. I'm still in verse 1. Back up a little higher, a little bit higher, right there. The word explain, declare. You notice I have several different things here. And go up a little bit more, Charlie. It's down toward the bottom of the page where you're looking, right? Okay, let me just go through this and see if I can find out where I'm talking. I'm looking at, sorry, brothers, let me find this because I want you to see the notes. It's the word explain, Charlie. So go down a little bit if you would. I think explains by it's right there. Go down a little bit more. That's it. 1, 2, and 3 is what I want to look about under explain. Notice that the verb, some people say the verb is a misprint for the word seek out. Now, this is one of those very close words, and the only difference, there are some Hebrew letters that are quite often misprinted, misread. This looks like it's a problem between two Hebrew letters, particularly the T and the B. So if so, it may be seek out. I came to seek out the truth. The second option is It may mean to be clear or to select. And that's used that way in Ecclesiastes 3:18. So we keep asking ourselves, is there other places in the book where this root is used? If you look at verse 1, the word seek out is used over and over. Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 7. And then the number 3, and this may surprise you. As you know, ancient Hebrew did not have space between some of the words. And you can divide the words differently. And somewhere where you make the division determines what root we're looking at. So some say this is a different Hebrew word, and the LXX, the Septuagint, has the word seen. And the only difference between seek and seen and be clear is one of these letter confusions. So this is the kind of thing we go through when we try to look at the semantical field of a Hebrew word. We're often, if we don't know what it is, a rare word. Hopefully it's in parallelism in poetry. Hopefully it's 3 consonants that we find in other Semitic languages, and we go there and try to see what it meant in that language if we're not sure what it means in Hebrew. And so these are the kind of things that scholars go through to try to determine the exact usage we're referring to here. But when it's all said and done, context is crucial. What makes sense of this verb in the possibilities of its meaning that fits this context best? Now, the next one I want to talk about is their deeds are in the hand of God. Now, friends, this is I think a major advance. We learned earlier in our study that it seems that there comes a point where the author says, yes, all is vanity, all is vain under the sun, but there is a sovereign God. He gives gifts to human beings. Now, we're coming back to that. Their deeds are in the hand of God. This is another emphasis repeated over and over of the sovereignty of God in this book. This author says, I'm not sure I can know God fully. I'm not sure I can understand what God's plan is, either for humanity or for me. I live in a fog. I believe there's a God, but I can't see him. Well, this is what this is talking about. God is with us and for us. We are in his hands, but that doesn't mean bad things don't happen. And I think that's what he's talking about. So I want to read my note here. It's not very long, and I think I said it well, so follow with me. This is the continuing theme of God's sovereignty, hands equal power. And I've given you all the places it's used and a special topic. And humanity's ignorance of the cause or reason for the present events and future events. Fallen humans do not control anything, but they still have life choices with consequences. Scriptures assures the believer that their lives are in the hand, i.e., control of God. I've given you several texts. However, experience teaches that bad things happen to good people. Life is uncertain at best, yet God is sure, present, and faithful. Faith sees through life's uncertainties, hear me now, and beholds God. Life is uncertain and undependable, but God is certain and dependable. This unknowingness of life after the fall may be an intentional test by God to see who really loves me. It is so easy to say, Jesus loves me, this I know, when things are going good in your life. But let disease come and death come and failure come and the wreck come and the bankruptcy come. Do we still say, Jesus loves me, this I know? Well, see, belief looks beyond circumstances to the unseen hand of God and will not let circumstances rob us of the peace that passes all understanding. We cannot let the darkness of the fall enter our souls. We are the gatekeepers of what we left in. We can't choose, listen to me now, we can't choose the circumstances, but we can choose how we respond to the circumstances. And the life of faith is shockingly different than the secular world. And really, this may be the wheat and the tares kind of parable of Jesus. They look just alike until they fruit out. I think there are a lot of people in the visible church who come to church for a lot of reasons instead of worshiping God, and their lives show it. So this may be a purposeful test. Now, the next phrase, man does not know whether it will be love or hatred, anything awaits him. Let me just put it as simply as I know how. We can't affect the past. Bad things happen. Yes, the pain is there. I can't get over the pain, but I've got to put it in a proper perspective. It's spilt milk. I can't change it. It's water under the bridge. I can't live my whole life looking backwards at what ifs, at why this. I just can't do it. I also know I don't know the future. It may be worse tomorrow. I can't change the past, and I don't know the future. So what do? Co-leaf. Live for today, friend. Smell the roses. Now, this is not debauchery. This is just saying the gifts of God are trusting him day by day, rich or poor, slave or free, smart or dumb. There's still somebody who loves you. You're still able to have family. You still have friends. You still get to eat together. You still get to enjoy the parties of social life. Enjoy today. If I could scream Ecclesiastes, it's quit worrying about what you can't change in the past and quit worrying about the maybe could be's tomorrow. You can't know that. No human being can know that. But God was in the past. God is with us today, and God is in the future. Is this the source of I was, I am, and I will be? Maybe so. I don't know. Okay. Life is unpredictable and uncontrollable. Now, if you know in the notes there, I put a little parenthesis saying contra divination, particularly Deuteronomy 18. Divination in the ancient world was an attempt to manipulate the future on behalf of the individual. It was an attempt through physical means, all kinds of physical, whether it be looking at clouds or looking at sheep's livers or throwing arrows on the ground. It was a way to determine the future and affect or change the future for my benefit. Well, the Bible, Ecclesiastes anyway, says, no, it's unknowable, it's unpredictable, and it leaves it at that. At least this book does. This agnostic philosophy, this is the agnostic philosophy that bothered the later rabbis. It totally challenges the two ways. Now, when I say two ways, I say that as kind of a quick way of bringing a whole lot of theology. The two ways are the human performance Mosaic covenant. Now, it's clarified in a couple of texts really well. It's clarified, I guess the one I think about most often is Deuteronomy 30. Where Moses says, I set before you life and death. Choose life. Why will you die, O house of Israel? Now, what he's talking about basically is this idea going back to Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 27 through 29, that says, look, if you keep the law, I'm going to bless you. You're going to be healthy. You're going to be abundant, have abundance. You're going to have safety. But if you break the law, I'm going to take you out of the land. Your children are going to be sold into slavery. Your crops aren't going to grow. It's these two ways. Maybe Psalm 1 is a good way. The righteous have one path, the wicked have another. The righteous is a tree planted by the water. Now, what this guy is saying is, you can plant your tree by the water, but you don't know if the spring's going to dry up tomorrow. You have no control. Now, see, that's what bothers us. But isn't that true? How many of us are away from death by one auto crash tomorrow? How many of us are one breath away from a heart attack or a stroke? I mean, friends, there's no certainty except there is a God that loves us and is with us. Boy, this is powerful stuff, I think. Now, I wanted to mention this, not in your notes, but I'll read it quickly in the same very place. The Jewish Publication Society of America. Now, this is the Jewish Study Bible that has the translation. I like this because it gives me a modern Jewish perspective by Hebrew scholars on not only the ancient text, but on modern discoveries of both scrolls and wall paintings and obelisk and all that's been found since the Hebrew was written. So I often look at the Jewish Publication Society of America. It suggests an emendation, which means a change of the consonants, to even love, even hate, no man can know in advance, all are insignificant. Now, friends, that's what this has been saying. You think you're hot, you're not. You think you control your own destiny, you do not. The events of life may be insignificant in the big picture of the human history, but they are significant to, number one, the individual and his family who are going through them. And listen to me now. Number two, there is a divine plan. We can't understand it, but we believe there is one. So even though these crises come, we don't know if they're going to be love or hate, life or death, rich or poor. We don't know any of that, but we do believe that God has a plan and God is with the individual. I think that's helpful. I think it's very helpful. Now, beginning in the second literary unit, which is, depending on what translation you use, this is in paragraph form in the New American Standard, but some translations put this in poetry, which would be a strophe. I've marked out here, and I hope you'll look at look at that text right there, Charlie. If don't, go back to the whole text. Go back down right there. Hold it, stand right there. Would you look at me that first couple of lines? It is all the same. There is one fate. Now look at these contrasting pairs. One fate for the righteous and the wicked. Now, do you see there it says for the good? Now, that's the Masoretic text, but the Septuagint as for the good and the bad. So that makes it another contrasting pair. So I think there are 6 contrasting pairs because I think the Septuagint has the fuller text here. For the clean and the unclean, that's ceremonial cleanliness. For the man who offers a sacrifice and the one who does not sacrifice. As a good man is, so is the sinner. Catch the contrast there. The swearer and the one who is afraid to swear. So there are 6 categories of contrasting pairs. Now, when I read that to you from that hermeneutics book, it said this is characteristic of all of Ecclesiastes. It's this, and this. And I think you can see that pretty much all the way through here, though the final verdict is it doesn't matter which part of these 6 categories, whether you're on the left or the right, you're all dead. Your life is insignificant. There's no memory of you. Your kids, how do you know they're not jerks? Now, see, there's no hope in the observational look at this world. The only hope is in this long-term faith. And chapter 12 will say obedience to God. Okay. I think that's summarized. If you go to the note in chapter 9, verse 2, it is the same for all. Now, this has been repeated. It first came out in chapter 2, verses 14 and 15, chapter 3, verse 19 and 20, and now it's repeated again. Chapter 9, verse 3, chapter 9, verse 11. One fate falls to all fallen human beings. We're all in the same boat together. And what Ecclesiastes asks over and over, is there any advantage in this life to the wise man versus the fool, to the rich versus the poor? They're all going to die. They're all going to be forgotten. Where is the lasting value? Where is the advantage? Where is the long-term profit? These are the questions that are running through this book that bring a spiritual note into the pessimism of this author. Okay, the contrasting pairs come again. I've listed them for you there in your notes. The summary is in verse 3, and there is one fate for all men, dash death. That's the unifying factor. Verse 3, and all that is done under the sun. Now, this is that wonderful, I think, clue that we're tongue-in-cheek. You want to see the full note? It's back in chapter 1, verse 3, okay, under the sun. One fate falls all men. Now, this again is the summary. All humans are going to experience death. All humans are going to experience meaninglessness. Okay, the hearts of the Son of Men are full of evil. Now, I thought about that, and the place that came to me as an Old Testament guy is, of course, the characterization of humanity just before the flood. You find that in Genesis chapter 6, and boy, these are scary verses. I hope you'll see them in my notes, and I hope you'll look at them on this. Chapter 6, verse 5, chapter 6, verse 11 and 12, chapter 6, verse 13, chapter 8, verse 21, and then I think Romans 3, 10 through 18, which is a series of 9 Old Testament quotes about how all men are sinful. What a mess we are in. And the one back before the flood is every thought of the human heart was on evil continuously. Think of the situation that God came with the flood and saved Noah and his family out of. Now, you notice the word insanity or madness. This is only used in Ecclesiastes. A related form is used, but it's used about 2 or 3 or 4 times. Now, what are we talking about? Well, as you can see in the notes, I think there are 2 possibilities. It may be Saul's experience in 1 Samuel 10, or it may be David's experience as he ran from Saul in 1 Samuel 21. So is this a historical reference? I'm not exactly full. I want to read this second little paragraph if I could. In Exodus 1:17 and 2:12, the meaning is parallel, this word, to the search for wisdom, and it does not have a negative connotation. However, in Ecclesiastes 7:25 and 9:3, it is parallel with evil and is obviously negative. The first pair describes the author's search for meaning and lasting advantage, but the last pair describes fallen humanity. The real question is, does co-leaf thought focus on Genesis 3 or on the covenant obedience of Leviticus 26? I'm not sure I know, but it looks like he's going back to some of these basic patterns that were set back in Genesis for his thought, which means this sage knew parts of the Torah. And he obviously knew parts of Proverbs and ancient Near Eastern literature for sure. So I think that's interesting. Let's go to verse 4. Life is better than death because it still remains a chance to know God. What, you know, a live dog's better than a dead lion. What's that all about? Well, a live dog can still find God. It's talking about while you have life, there's a possibility of faith. We're going to talk about life in Sheol. And friends, Old Testament life after death was a miserable place. Thank God for progressive revelation. But anyway, at these points, several exact opposite interpretations are possible. This is what they play on wisdom literature. Number 1, totally pessimistic, there is no hope. Number 2, pessimistic with a glimpse of hope here and there. There may be hope. Number 3, always speaking sarcastically about the fallen world. There is always hope with God. It seems to me that number 2 of these 3 fits this context best. Now, notice the next the paragraph that says the MT has the verb chosen. Now, this is where people always say to me, the MT is absolutely authoritative and is absolutely the word of God. Friends, the Masoretic text was not even finished until 900 AD. And the reason it was done, it was the Pharisees' copy of many Hebrew manuscripts circulating before the temple fell. And after the temple was destroyed by Rome in AD 70, the only sect of Judaism to survive was the Pharisees, and their translation was the Masoretic text. Now, there were many other translations available, Hebrew translations. So there are some places where even the scholars within, we call them the Masoretic scholars, recognized the Hebrew text was wrong. They suggested changes in the marginal of their manuscript. And this is one of those. They call them a Keir suggestion. So even though the MT has chosen, the Masoretic text realized it should be joined. And the only difference between those chosen and joined is the first 2 consonants are transposed. And you can see how this could happen so easily in handwritten manuscripts. Okay, now the word dogs, friends, this is not your pet. These are street mongrels. I mean, there are some really negative things about these dogs. I didn't put them in my notes yet. They'll be in the revised form. If you're interested, I'll give you a couple of places where the negative view of dogs are found. Psalm 59, verse 6 and 14, and 1 Kings 14:11. You know, Jezebel getting eaten by the dogs. That was what dogs do. And so That's the idea of dogs there. Okay, look at verses 5 and 6. That again, this is under the sun sarcasm or logic of Koheleth drives him to a search for lasting advantage. Now, there's several words I've been using here: advantage, profit, or lasting gain. Now, this goes back to the first use of advantage in chapter 1. The full note is there. But what he's basically saying with the use of this word is, don't look at the pain right now. Don't look at immediately what you're going through. Take the long look. How will the man of faith do, not just in this life? How will the man of faith do in the next life? How will the man who keeps God's laws and worships God, how will he do, not just today, but how will he do in eternity? Now, this, I think, is the contrast that we have here. I've mentioned here, if there is no God, there is no lasting advantage. There's no long-term profit. I've given you several things that I think people are afraid of, and Koheleth addresses them. Number one, the living struggle with the fear of death. They want to know, but they can't know. The living seek happiness, but they can't find lasting happiness. The living seek memorials, build a big building, dig a big tomb. But the problem is, a couple of generations, they take the stones out of your tomb and build their house with them. There's no memorials. Everything is gone. All memory is gone. So that's the problem. So this is an unfair, unjust, and surprisingly evil world. So what can a godly person do? Come on, in face of all the problems and sin and unfairness and evil and wars and disease, what can a man of faith do? Well, he's going to give us several suggestions, 1 and 2. Number 1, enjoy life when and where you can. How many times have I said that? Look at the string of verses behind that. Number 2, trust God and keep the commandments. That's all we can do. Enjoy today and believe God is with us and for us. Now, verse 5, I've written something that's not in your notes, so let me just take a minute to go over it. I think it's interesting. Let me get my new notes. For their memory is forgotten. This concept of memory or remembrance is viewed in several ways in the Old Testament. So I'm going to give you a list of 5 ways the idea of memory or remembrance is used in very different ways. Number 1, the wicked pagan nations and their leaders their memory will be wiped out. Now, another image that goes with this, their names will be removed from the book of life. And that's another way of talking about this. So pagan nations will not be remembered, or their leaders. Number 2, the righteous will be remembered. Now, I got 2 verses for you. Proverbs 10:7 and Psalms 112:6. So there's pagan nations will not be remembered, but the righteous will. Hallelujah. How are we remembered? In God, in the books that God has, the book of life and the book of deeds. I did a special topic. It's called the 2 books of God. If you're interested in seeing all the verses, I hope those are helpful to you. Number 3, the wicked among the covenant people will not be remembered. Now, remember, we're talking to Israel here. You mean that those within the nation who are the covenant people, but that do not love and trust God, they won't be remembered? Let me give you a few verses. Ecclesiastes 8:10, Psalm 34:16, Psalm 69:28, and a couple more. Number 4, Koheleth's reaction to traditional wisdom, even the righteous will not be remembered. Ooh, you hear this man's anti-wisdom wisdom? Here's the verses. Ecclesiastes 2:16, Ecclesiastes 9:5. So which is true, the Proverbs 10 or the Ecclesiastes 2? Well, you got to see the context in which they're used. Proverbs is an affirmation of a righteous person in the Mosaic covenant. Koheleth is the reaction to why such bad things happen to godly covenant people. So he is reacting against this, as David did in Psalm 73, as Job did in the book of Job. And then number 5, all memory of human activity will be totally forgotten. Now, that's a theme over and over again in Ecclesiastes. Here's the verses: 1:11, 2:16, 9:5. Nothing remains of human activity. Get over it. You're not that hot would be a good way to put it. You build a building, you build a monument, time will take it away. It'll just take it away. That's why it's best to build a life of faith. Nobody can take it away. Okay, verse 6. This verse describes the fleeting, transitory life of humans. The term share now is translated different ways, even in Ecclesiastes. So here's a semantical field you got to check. It should be translated share. It's translated reward in several places, lot, a person's lot in one place, and portion. And of course, we're talking about, this is the word that was used for Joshua dividing the land up with the Urim and Thummim for the different tribes. So what is a person's lot? Share, portion in this life. Now, the next paragraph, verses 7 through 9, I think it's interesting that these verses are very, very similar to part of the Gilgamesh epic. And people get all bent out of shape when it seems like parts of the Bible seem to wind up in these other ancient literary units. Wisdom literature was known across national boundaries. A lot of the idioms, there are many places where a poem or a song was written to a certain god, and the Jews took it and just changed the name of the deity. Because the pagan one is older than the Jewish nation. So I know you don't like that, but the truth is, this is why we try to interpret the Bible in light of its original author's historical, geographical setting. What would the people of that day have understood? Well, their understanding of the cosmos, their understanding of life as both spiritual and physical, all of that comes from the milieu of the ancient Near East. Now, Israel is unique because of its monotheism. Israel is unique because of what we believe is inspiration of the author. But the themes and categories, vocabulary, and idioms circulated among many peoples across many nations in the ancient world. Okay, look at my note, please. This is Coley's answer to the futility and uncertainty of human existence. Now, I'm going to just give you a list of all the commands in these few verses. Now, notice these commands, and they relate to what we talked about earlier about enjoy life today. Notice them. Go, eat, drink. Let your clothes be white all the time. Let oil not be lacking from your head. Enjoy life with the woman you love. Do it with all your might. These are suggestions of how to enjoy today, how to focus on the benefits we have daily, all men have. And we don't have a promise these benefits will be there tomorrow. We can't affect what happened in the past, but we can say, God, thank you. This is the day the Lord has made. I'll rejoice and be glad in it. This is the picture in my mind of that beautiful picture that I think it's one of an old man and one of an old woman sitting at a very rough-hewn wood desk. They got a little bowl of soup in front of them and an old piece of bread. And yet the man and woman are thanking God for his provisions. This is what Kodesh is saying. You may have only soup, but thank God you got soup. You may not have all you want, but you're alive and you can still know God and draw close to him. Happiness is found not in wisdom, pleasure, or possessions, but in the simple pleasures of daily life. And I've listed those here, and you can see them. Home and family. And of course, in that is the ideal of sexual joy, the joy of children, the joy of parties with the family, weddings, births of children, work. I tell young people when I taught at school, don't get a job to make money. Get a job that you enjoy. If you get a job you enjoy, you'll never have to work a day in your life. We get significance from what we do. Labor is important. Labor was not given after the fall. It was given to Adam before the fall, Genesis 2:15. Labor is one of the ways to keep our mind off the futility of this life. Labor is a good thing. Friends, commitment with gratitude to God for what you have, not what you do not have. Do you fret about what you don't have, or do you thank God for what you do have? Peace comes with contentment. I'm over it now. Verse 7, my background's Baptist, and, I always get kicked out of the church whenever I bring this up, but it's still true. I'm a Bible teacher. I'm going to teach the Bible no matter what the circumstances are. It talks about drink your wine with a cheerful heart. Friends, the Bible does not teach total abstinence. And if you think that the wine in the Bible was fruit juice, you don't understand the ancient method of producing it. Wine's not the problem. Abuse of wine is the problem. If you make wine the problem, you've just thrown Jesus under the bus. You think the wedding feast of Canaan, when he made 180 gallons, there wasn't some excess there? And they said the wine at last was better than the wine at first, just reverse of the normal procedure. So I hope you'll look at that special topic called biblical attitudes toward alcohol and alcohol abuse. The Bible rails against drunkenness, just rails against it. But wine's not the problem. The abuse of wine is the problem. And the same is almost true of every God-given gift. What we do is take the good things that God has given us and take them beyond God-given bounds, where they become destructive instead of blessing. And it's true of this. Now, the next little phrase is interesting. For God has already approved your works. Now, this can't refer to sin or rebellion. It must refer to God's activity within the fallen world. Life is hard, but we are not alone. I don't know why you're going through this, but I do believe the God of creation is with you and for you. I do not know why me, why now, why this. I can't answer that in this part of life, but I do think that God has a plan and he is with you. Now, I'm not a Calvinist either. But I still believe that's very true. Let your clothes be white. What this is saying is put on nice, good clothes. Don't go around a sack and look grumpy all the time. No, put on the white clothes. Have a positive mindset. Putting oil on the face. Now, olive oil, this is very hot climate. Olive oil on the skin and the face partly protected your skin drying out. It made it glisten. And this was a way for those people to prepare for going out to have a party, getting ready for the day. It showed somebody who was ready to face the day positively. I think that's what it's talking about here. Sign of gladness, a preparation for social events. Now, verse 9, I really like this. This is enjoy life with the woman of you love all the days of your fleeting life. I taught Song of Songs years ago, and there's some pretty racy, but wonderful, wonderful lines in there about sex is a gift from God. Enjoy it with the person that you love. I mean, it's not a bad thing. Of course, human beings twisted into evil. Do you prioritize your spouse? Or do you try to make life special for them? Do you try to be kind? Do you try to put yourself in their place in some of the arguments and disagreements you have? Enjoy life with the woman you love. That's not a bad deal, man. I'm so sad about those who, I guess, just real quickly, Errol Flynn, he was a swashbuckling kind of a movie star early in the period of movies in the U.S. And they said he made love to every lady that he did a film with. So he was known for just a lady killer kind of guy. And on his deathbed, somebody said, "What is the best sex you ever had?" And he mentioned his wife's name. Do you hear the sadness of that? Searching and seeking for more and more and more. And all the time it was home. It was there. Oh my. Oh my. Marital contentment is a great blessing from God. And I would just add, not only marriage contentment, but a Christian marriage may be the most powerful witness to a society like ours who knows nothing about good, real love. Wisdom literature used the concept of woman in two ways. I want to go back with this again because it's often confused. I remember back in chapter 7, I think it was 28 or 29, it said it was kind of negative toward women. Well, this is a patriarchal system. Solomon sure had a bad life with young women toward the end when they pulled his heart away from the Lord. He even put idolatrous shrines in the temple area. Man. So in parts of Proverbs, wisdom is this beautiful woman who has wisdom around her neck. And if you'll come to her, young man, she will give you this garland of wisdom that you wear proudly all your life. She is a symbol. The word wisdom in Hebrew is feminine. She is a symbol of this peace and joy and instruction and revelation that God will give to those who seek him and come to him. But there's Proverbs 8:22 is wisdom is the first of creation, and God created everything through her. But there's the other woman, the adulteress, the temptress, who stands at the corner of the street and cries out to young men, "Hey, let's have some fun tonight. That's instant gratitude. You don't know what tomorrow holds, so let's go around for all the gusto we can get tonight." Now, knowing young men the way you do, which one has the longest line in front of them? So that's the way we're dealing with this feminine aspect to wisdom here. Verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, verily do it with all your might. Now, this again, I've made the notes about that work was not a part of the fall. It was work of keeping the garden before the fall. I think often when I think about this, I guess the passage in Ephesians is the one that gets me. I think it's Ephesians 6:5-6. Whatever you do, do it as unto the Lord. That's what we're saying. Whatever job, task, whatever, loving your wife, teaching your children, making a living, being with the elder, whatever you do it as unto the Lord. Because it's not so much what we do, it's the motive behind what we do. And God knows the motive as well as the deed. So work is good. We can glorify God with it. There is no activity or planning in Sheol. There's three things: no activity, no planning, and no wisdom. Now, the word Sheol, this is the Old Testament word for the holding place of the dead. Everybody went there. In the Old Testament, it was a conscious existence. You were with your family, but there was no joy. There was no communication. There was no fellowship. It was a very shadowy, dark kind of place. Everybody went there. I've done a special topic on Sheol. It's a part of a bigger topic called Where Are the Dead, where I try to show all the different places in the Bible where the dead are. But this is Old Testament. This is Sheol. Thank God for the New Testaments. But notice the things that humans do not do in Sheol. This is Old Testament perspective. We're letting the author of Ecclesiastes speak. There is no activity, no work, no sense of purpose. There is no planning, no reckoning schemes. Number 3, no pursuit of knowledge. Number 4, you can't gain wisdom. There's no lasting benefit to anything. Oh, what a miserable view of death, my soul. Now verses 11 and 12. These verses highlight the ineffectiveness and helplessness of human effort. Life is unpredictable and uncontrolled. Now here are the conclusions. Enjoy life when and where you can. Death is coming for all. Number 2, trust God even if he is unknown and invisible. Number 3, there is an afterlife, and humans will give an account of the gifts and stewardship of life. Now, I've written a little note there. I wanted to read that. I wrote this years ago, decades ago, really. As I sit here writing this, I am so glad I live in a post-resurrection era. Progressive revelation, the life of Jesus, the gospel, the empty tomb are ours. The New Testament believers understand so much more of the eternal plans and purposes of God than any Old Testament person. The real tension for us is, what are we doing with this information? Let me drive that home. I do it to young people a lot. You know more about God than Moses, Isaiah, any of the prophets. You know more about God than any Old Testament person. Think of the awesome gift and awesome responsibility of that kind of information. And the question is, what are you doing with that kind of information? Okay, enough said. The preacher in me is content to move on. Verses 13 through 18. Now, as I look at this, you can read it, but it sounds like a very specific historical event that Coleth had observed. The The Septuagint, it translates it as subjunctives, which means it's a hypothetical situation. But the Masoretic text has these as a cal-perfect verbs, which means a completed action. So I am not sure what this really refers to. These verses magnify wisdom, but in the end, wisdom is ignored and forgotten. The wise man can affect things, but so can the sinner. Well, that's the best I can do with that. Now, verse 13, it's several different ways. It's not in your note. Just let me read it for you real quick. The New American Standard had, it impressed me. The New King James had, it seemed great to me. The Revised English Bible says, I find it of great significance. Now, Coleth has tried to make sense of life. It was like a stimulant, but he could not figure it out. Life on this planet in this period is mysterious, unpredictable, unfair, and deadly. You said that's pretty negative. Well, friends, that's why this book had such a hard time getting in the canon. It just shocks us. We think everything's good. We think everything's stable. We think everything's going well. And this book just rubs our nose in the ineffectiveness of human life. Man. Now, verse 17 and 18. Wisdom has a place in life. It is better than ... You fill it in. But it brings no lasting advantage or profit. Better be wise than to be dumb. Yes. Practical, yes. But theological, no difference. Human wisdom cannot solve the problem. Okay, good. Let's go to chapter 10 if we could. I think it's another chapter that kind of picks up on these thoughts. Let's just go to the text if we could. Let's look at verse 1. Now the dead flies and the perfume's oil stink. Now this idea of perfume oil, there are two parallel Hebrew words here. One is the word, let me see, cause to stink. It's an imperfect. And one is the word cause to bubble. Now the word bubble showed there was fermentation. So these dead animals ruined the container of perfume. Now what we're going to come to is one person can destroy the whole. We would say in ours, one bad apple spoils the bunch, or one bad egg spoils the omelet. Now, if you've ever been a pastor, you know that's true in church. Negative people, theologically inaccurate people, aggressive, egotistical people, sometimes can, I don't know how many times in a business meeting, I've visited couples, I've just prayed with them, encouraged them to come to church. They come to church and we have a hair pull over what scripture text to put on Vacation Bible School pencils. Unbelievable. So that kind of stuff just wipes out the chance to minister to so many people. And it happens over and over and over again. Now the word weightier, this is the Hebrew concept. It goes to the Hebrew word kabod, which means glory, usually translated. That which was heavy is that which is valuable. Now we're talking about a pair of scales here. There was a set of weights that the seller would put on one side of the scale, and then he put so much wheat or flour or rice or whatever they were buying on the other side. And when it equaled, that's how much you got. So that's where the idea of heavier meant more valuable. And so this is a play on that. You can see heavier or outweighs is kind of a play on that. Notice the three here. They are parallel. Wisdom and honor are parallel. This is a play on that concept of heavier. It's a word play. Now, the right and the left are another play. I'm not sure we fully understand that. And this is one of those idioms that I think we may have lost the true meaning to. The people who receive this would know exactly. Is it just talking about two different ways of doing life, two different, we come to a fork in the road, one goes this way, one goes that way, or is there a connotation of right being righteous and left being evil? I really can't answer that. I'm not even sure I know that. I know the Arabic root, the word left means unlucky. Part of me says that this is imagery going back to the idea of God's law as a well-worn wagon path, or the path of animals going from water to food to sleep. It's a very straight path. It's very clear. And the Bible says, stay on that path. You don't have to think about what does God want me to do. He's told you, stay on the path. Do not deviate to the right or the left. Now, it doesn't matter if you're in the left ditch or the right ditch. The problem is you deviated from what you believe God wanted you to do. I think that is the ultimate ideal here. In verse 3, one's actions reveals one's character. Well, I can sure amen that, right? One's actions, and I would add one's words, reveals one's character. Literally, it has, the fool has no heart. Now, of course, we're using the word heart as the organ of intelligence and cognition and thinking and choosing here. The fool does not have the ability to think. Now we're talking about in verse 4 about how does someone act before the king. Now, I've said it before. It seems strange to me. If Solomon wrote this, it would be strange for me to him to be talking about how someone acts before another king or another person. It's another evidence that this is not Solomon's authorship. And what we're saying here is, if you just get the king's furious and he's mad and he's stomping his feet, the best thing you can do is be calm. Being calm is the appropriate way for a servant to address an angry master. The calmness shows something that we're not guilty of the charges. The calmness says something that when the leader does come back to their senses, they'll be grateful for someone with a calm, gentle attitude toward what's going on. I think that's the context here of 5 through 7, but you'll have to see what you think. Now, notice in verse 5, I have seen, now this is a recurrent theme, 47 times. Why? Because this book is based on observational wisdom. This is not a book primarily based on special inspiration. It's on natural revelation. He's looking at life and saying, as I see, this is what happens. So it's a different way of looking at things. Okay, let's go to verses 8 and 9. These two are several unexpected consequences. Now, I have 2 in my notes, but I have added 2 more, and I hope you'll think about adding them in your notes too. I think there's more here. First one, a person who digs a pit to capture an animal, probably for food or whatever, for their skin, or a person, will be captured by it. See Proverbs 26:27. You dig a pit for one purpose and something else happens. Number 2, a person breaks through a wall to escape, but in doing so is bitten by a snake who's hiding there. Now, this breaking through a wall can refer to expanding a field. It's not just escaping an enemy. It could be building a house or expanding your rock wall. But anyway, unintended consequences. The third one is workers in stone. Now, sometimes you say it's the word quarry, but it really just means workers in stone. It could be the building of a house with stones or building of a wall with stones. You might drop it on your foot. You might get a hernia, unexpected consequences. And the last one is a woodcutter. Now, he doesn't sharpen his axe, so he has to use a whole lot more effort to cut the wood, unintended consequences. So I think that what the flow through here is these unintended consequences. It must be admitted the above interpretation assumes a negative attitude, which is not easily demonstrated from the text itself. It's one of my presuppositions. It is possible, however, that the results described are merely accidental and unexpected. No intention, unexpected. Okay, let me look at verse 10 for a minute, and I've added something to my notes, so let me quickly read it to you and see what you think. A little phrase I'm picking up on is wisdom has the advantage of giving success. Now, this is that wonderful word for advantage, but this is a perfect example of how words are used in different ways in different parts of Bible books. And you cannot set one definition and apply that definition everywhere that root appears, because you'll really make a mistake. Because the word advantage here is not the word used back in chapter 1, verse 3 about lasting spiritual advantage, the long look. No. This is a more temporary look. This is a more surprising thing. So you got to see how the word is used in context and not just set a certain definition on it. Okay, let's go then to 10 and 11. Humans can take actions, gain wisdom that will help in their lives. Lives are easier and better. For a wise man does have an easier life. He does have a better life. There are human choices and actions. You can take the wreath from the woman who is wisdom and live in it. You can keep the commandments of God. There is a human choice there, and you're better for it. But you're still going to die, fool. There's still going to be no memory of you. There's still no real purpose unless there's a God. Okay. Let's see. We talk about a snake charmer here. I've been in India several times, and I've seen them on the street. It's always been interesting to me when you talk to people who know what they're saying. They say usually these snake charmers break the fangs of the snake off so they couldn't bite you anyway, or they sew the mouth of the snake together on the side so he can't open it. If you ever seen them, they use kind of a flute going back and forth that almost kind of hypnotizes the snake. Now, this is kind of like divination in a sense. It's not referred to positively or negatively. It's just an example of street life that these people would recognize. And what is the point here? If you do not charm the snake, you're going to get bit. Unintended consequences. And that's been the theme that we've seen throughout this several deal. Now, verses 12 through 14, there's a play on the word mouth, lips, and swallow, consume. What we say does make a difference. Now, I've given you several places there in your notes. This is where Jesus says it's not what goes in a man that defiles him, it's what comes out. This is Jesus saying you'll give an account of every word spoken. I mean, man, our speech does reveal. I've done a special topic, as you can see, called human speech. I hope you'll look at that. It's several pages long, but it deals with this subject in more detail. Now, verse 13, the end of it is wicked madness. Now, what is this wicked madness? This refers to the attitude of life that recognizes no moral law operating in the world. These would be antinomians. There's no law for me. This is dog eat dog. Do whatever you can to get what you can. It's more for me at any cost. 14, no man knows what will happen, and who can tell him what will come after him. This is a recurrent theme. We don't know the future. We can't know the future. It's just driven home again and again. Verse 15. There are several ways to view this verse, and I think this idea of giving you several options first came to me as I've enjoyed reading the United Bible Society's handbook for translators on different books of the Bible. And what they do is take the grammatical feature of an inspired text, and they say, look, this grammatical feature could be understood this way, or this way. Now, they're not telling you which one they think is best. Sometimes they do. Most of the time, they just give you the options. Then you got to say to yourself, which one of these options best fits the larger context? Now, sometimes we don't know. That's why sometimes the Bible is just, because we weren't part of that culture and we weren't the first hearers, we don't always understand all the intricacies of these verses. But I think that fits like that. So there are several ways to view this verse. Number one, work makes a fool tired instead of happy. Number two, fools do not like work. They are lazy. Number three, fools cannot find a path to the city, i.e., the job's in the city and they can't find a road that leads to the city. Purposeful, I think. Anyway, those are the possibilities. Now, the word woe is kind of the word for alas. It's usually used for judgments. And it's talking about, it's only used twice in the Old Testament, both in Ecclesiastes. There are two reasons for this woe is me. Number one, a young, inexperienced ruler. Number two, drunken, worldly minded leadership. Now, both those are bad news. And that's what he's talking about. Woe. The word blessed is the semantic opposite of that, antonym of that. And it's talking about how are you blessed? Well, it comes back to the idea of an appropriate time. Now, this would be back to chapter 3. These appropriate times are the God-given times. This is another allusion to the sovereignty of God, that he gives humans things in seasons, that all humans go through these different cycles. Don't you get tickled of all the stuff on TV that tries to make you young and do what you used to do 30 years earlier? See, it's a way as humans trying to get away from these cycles, but they're here for strength. Now, I didn't like this verse at all. because I like to eat. And I'm really looking forward to the Messianic banquet, and I know there's going to be ribs. I just know there are. Food is for activity, not for inactivity. It's not for a party. It's so you can work. We don't live to eat. We eat to live. And that'd be a good way to put it. Verse 18. This seems to be an unrelated saying, CF today's English version in the New Jerusalem Bible, which chastises inactivity, Proverbs 24. It may be related to the characteristics of the leaders we've been talking about. That's King James, New King James, New Revised Standard. Several of the words are rare. Now, the word rafters and point toward a cultural proverb. What we're saying here is somebody didn't take care of the house and the house fell down. You have to maintain buildings or they're going to lose their effectiveness. Now, this thing about money, two possibilities here. Is this negative? Well, just a minute. If our mind goes to the New Testament, the love of money is the root of all evil, this seems to be negative. But wait a minute. Would you agree with me that money has a purpose? If you're going to feed your family, you better have made some money through your labor. If you're going to buy food, if you're going to buy drink, if you're going to travel to the family party, it takes money to do life. So I am not 100% sure this is meant to be negative. Now, if it recurs to feasting out of bounds, it's negative. But it may be that Kolith is saying, enjoy the parties that you can. Use your money to have a good time because it may take your mind off the burden of this life where you do not understand and allows you to enjoy the moment. Now, I think in context that fits better. Now, verse 20, what this is saying is that loose lips destroy a city. You know, if you get mad and say things, people may listen and use it against you. Just be careful what you say. All of us think things. A sign of wisdom is you don't always tell everyone everything you're thinking. And be careful of your rash statements. And sometimes we say things and really we don't mean them. We just say them out of a sense of frustration or anger or whatever. So be careful what you say. A bird may carry it to the person you're talking about. And then you'll have your feelings hurt and their feelings hurt. Well, that's these two chapters. I think it had some interesting stuff. And I hope I was able to focus you again on what the original author would have meant and intended in his day.